show. Can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Microsoft?
Hey, Ashiko. Sure. Yeah, so I am a product manager at Microsoft working on Azure Static Web Apps. And yeah, we're excited to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of our product. So thanks for having us on the show.
Yeah, time flew by. I'm really excited, and you've done a lot of stuff. So tell us what you're going to show us today.
Yeah, so I think it would be good to kind of walk through the last year of features and other things that we've shipped, just to get everyone caught up on what's new on static web apps. And then maybe we can go and dive into a demo about how we can use static web apps in a real world deployment pipeline.
That sounds great. And hi, Eric and KJ Miller. Congrats on the anniversary. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And please send us your questions through the chat, and we'll answer some of them, hopefully, today.
Yeah, we'll answer the easy ones.
Yeah. Would you like to share your screen? Should I add that?
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's dive right into it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought what we could do is go through, some of the updates that we kind of announced, and then we can just talk about them. So a good place to find out really any updates for any Azure product is this page called Azure Updates. So you can go ahead and Google that, or I should go put that up on the screen. So it's really literally anything that happens to any Azure product is announced here. So I've kind of gone ahead and opened a bunch of static web apps updates for the last year, and we'll just kind of walk through it right now. So the first one, obviously, is the static web apps is now generally available announcement. So this happened a year ago. Like, what's the date today?
Actually, it's tomorrow.
Almost a year ago. Almost a year ago. I think it's a year ago for some of you. Maybe
exactly.
Maybe our friends in Australia.
Yeah, India. Anyone is joining from there.
Yeah, awesome. But since then, you can see that I've opened a bunch of other tabs here. Like we've announced a bunch of other things. So I'm going to walk through a few of them. So this one here is, static web apps allows you to add authentication to your app really easily. If you want, put GitHub authentication or Azure authentication or Twitter authentication on top of your app. It's literally just a configuration setting. But sometimes we want to kind of do a little bit more when somebody logs into their app. So we now allow you to run a serverless function when somebody logs in, so that you can actually, for instance, you want to add them to certain roles. You can do that with this function.
Yeah, I actually made a video about it last year too, so I'll find it and paste
it.
Nice.
Yeah, well, we got to share that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We've also kind of added some features to kind of lock down your static web app. If you want to lock it down by IP addresses, you can do that. Last year, .NET 6 was announced. So that's like the latest LTS. What does that stand for? Long-term supported version of .NET. It was announced in November. So static web app supports that as well. Both for the front end, building a Blazor app, as well as the back end using a .NET 6 Azure function. And another big feature that we announced is what we call enterprise grade edge. So out of the box, even in the free tier, static web apps automatically distributes your static assets all over the world. So if somebody's accessing it halfway around the world, they're actually downloading your website from somewhere that's really close to them. But what we allow you to do now is, with a click of a button, you can enable this feature called Enterprise Grade Edge. So it literally puts Azure Front Door in front of your application, so that so that you get a lot more points of presence, as well as the caching is a little bit better in it as well. And Azure Front Door also has a lot of built-in things like built-in, denial of service attack prevention and things like that.
So what is Front Door? Azure Front Door, Anthony?
Yeah, Azure Front Door, it's like a really smart CDN, content delivery network. So they're able to kind of cache your content at these edge nodes, so that when your customers or when your end users are accessing your website or your web app, it's able to kind of, download it as quickly as possible. But it also allows you to kind of set a lot of rules and things like that, as well as to kind of configure different backends that you can route to. The feature that we're kind of providing you in Azure Static Web Apps, though, is a managed version of it. So you don't actually see a lot of these knobs that you have control over. We just automatically, put Azure Front Door in front of your app, and you don't really have to do anything else.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And then another one is the ability to specify an API language runtime version. So when we first released Static Web Apps, we had support for Node 12, as well as Python 3.8, I think, and .NET Core 3.1. And for a long time, that's all we could really kind of support, because there wasn't really a way for the developer to specify any other language version. So if somebody wanted to use Node 14 or Node 16, they weren't able to do that. So earlier this year, we allowed we shipped a configuration feature that allows you to kind of choose the backend language version, so that you can now run Node 14 or Node 16 Azure functions if you need to.
Oh, awesome. That's good news for all of us Node developers here. Yeah,
for sure. And another thing that a lot of folks have been asking for is to be able to protect their static web apps with a password. So quite often where this comes up is that, a lot of our kind of customers are, design agencies and things like that. Basically, they're building an app for an end client, but they don't want to kind of have it open to the public yet. They just want to be able to share a link with their customer, with their client, and be like, hey, can you test out the site? And then basically you can kind of go through a review process without opening up the app to the rest of the world when it's not ready yet. So with this feature, they now put a password on their site, and then they can easily share it with any of their friends or their customers, so that they can actually look at it, but they have to first log in before they can see the site.
If I'm understanding correctly, they don't have to write logic or anything like that, and they can just configure it in your static web app to have a password.
Yeah, and there's actually a few different ways you can use this as well. So Static Web Apps has these things that we call preview environments or staging environments. So for instance, if you submit a new pull request on GitHub to your Static Web App, we will automatically create a staging environment or preview environment for that pull request. And with this feature, you can actually choose to protect just your preview environments. So your production site is still open to the public, but your preview environments require a password. Or you can choose to protect everything. So you can say that include everything, including my production website, should be locked down with a password. So you're able to do that really easily. And this also works on top of the built-in authentication feature that I talked about earlier. So if your app happens to allow end users to log in using GitHub or something, you can still have that capability in the app. But before you can even reach the app at all, you would have to provide this password. So you can actually use these features together. So you don't have to choose one or the other.
So basically, there's a lot of stuff that is automatically there for anyone to build their website and then protect it without having to, write a lot of code to do that. This is really awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
And CI/CD is built into it as well, right?
Yep. So out of the box, we integrate with GitHub Actions, and in one of these announcements that I'll kind of talk about later, we've actually kind of expanded it to other CI/CD providers as well.
Oh, that is great. So for those of you who are not familiar with the GitHub Actions allows you to just anytime you push your code, for example, there's the logic to push it to your development, staging environment or production.
Yeah, Yeah, we leverage GitHub Actions a lot in static web apps.
Yeah, and it is magical. Like not being having to read all of the documentation and understand all of the GitHub Actions and what are they and how to do it. It happens automatically with static web apps. I love it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We talked about being able to lock down your application to certain IP addresses before, but we also now fully support what we call private endpoints on Azure. So if you want to only expose your static web apps to your virtual network and nobody else, you can now do that.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So a lot of our kind of enterprise customers who are kind of like setting up things like internal documentation sites and internal kind of like intranet type things using static web apps. They're using this a lot.
Oh, this is really nice, and I can see that if I have a, data visualization for all of the IoT devices in my network, I might not want all of that data to leave my premises, right? And
Right.
this
Yeah.
is a good way to do that.
Yeah. And then a few more. So another thing that we kind of shipped earlier, I mentioned that we provide you kind of preview environments for pull requests. So the only way in the past to create a preview environment is to create a pull request on your site. You no longer need to do that. You can actually, in your GitHub Actions and these other ways of deploying, you can actually now say that this deployment is going to an environment called staging, and you can name it anything you want. And we'll just deploy it to that. What this allows you to do is that, like obviously you no longer have to create a pull request just to get a preview. It also, means that you can have a preview environment that sticks around for as long as you want. The ones that we provide you for for pull requests, as soon as you close the pull request, that environment disappears.
Oh.
With these ones, you don't have to worry about them disappearing. So if you want to, just call one, create one named staging, it can stick around forever. And some of the benefits are obviously you can, share an environment, base a URL with the team that's, that's going to be the same, today as a month from now, for your staging environment. And things like, if you want to set up authentication, we do allow you to configure, with, really any kind of OpenID Connect compliant provider. And all of these require you to kind of give them a like a callback URL to allow lists. They won't just redirect the user to just any URL. You have to kind of provide the URL that you want them to redirect back to. And it wasn't super convenient to do this before, when you only had like when your URLs kept changing because it kept changing because of your it gets changed. It keeps changing based on your pull request number. So now you have a stable URL that you can set up once with your auth providers, and it just works.
Oh, this is really cool. Is our documentation using static web apps? I wonder.
Not yet. We'd love to, convince them to kind of switch over. But we actually our Azure documentation. I think that's what you're kind of talking about, like the Microsoft documentation. Yeah, it's this giant repo of a bunch of markdown files, and it's not just a hosting environment, but also it's a whole kind of we have a whole custom process for building and deploying it. So it's actually a pretty neat thing, and we'd love to see that running on static web apps one day too.
That would be great, because the problem that you're mentioning is happening all the time. We have specific URLs related to the pull request, and it's impossible for other people to find.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you built a lot of stuff in 1 year.
Yeah, and I'll kind of quickly go over 2 or 3 more. So I mentioned like CI/CD providers before. We started with just GitHub support, so we added support for GitLab and Bitbucket as well. And also, we also added support for Azure Dev Ops, which is a very common ask for a lot of customers who are using existing Azure resources, including Azure Dev Ops, deploy their applications. So now you can go through the portal to create an app, and you can choose Azure Dev Ops, and it'll actually create a Azure Dev Ops pipeline for you, just like we do with GitHub Actions. I think there's one more here, but I think that's also DevOps as well. yeah, this is and this particular announcement talks about that, how you can now just seamlessly create your DevOps pipelines without really doing anything.
Really cool. Let's see this in action. And meanwhile, while Anthony is preparing for that, everyone, please, let us know what you think about static web apps. If you use it, if you haven't, what will make you use it? And all of the hard questions. Anthony said, "I'm here for the hard question" at the beginning. If you missed it.
Yep, I think that's exactly what I said. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
hard questions.
Give me all of the hard ones.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, like let's go into a bit of a demo that kind of shows off some of the things that we kind of just mentioned. So we talked about the ability to use CI/CD providers other than GitHub Actions, and we also talked about things like the ability to lock down a web like a static web app using a password, and the ability to deploy to a specific kind of environment. Like if you want to deploy to a staging environment first before you deploy to production. Previously, for a customer to be able to do this, you would have to actually create 2 different static web apps and deploy to each of them separately. Now you can just deploy to different environments within the static web app. So there's a bunch of features that kind of pulls together pretty nicely in this little demo here. So I'll kind of quickly walk through it. So here I have Azure DevOps repository. So with Azure DevOps, you can store your code in a Git repository, just like you could with GitHub. And you can also create these pipelines that are a lot like GitHub Actions workflows that you can configure to deploy your app. So actually, the one thing that I will probably show you first is if you go to the Azure portal to try to create an app. Static web apps, if I can spell. And you can see now, if you scroll down, you can choose Azure DevOps here. And then I can actually go and find the exact repo that I want. And then just by clicking create, it'll actually configure the CI/CD pipeline and just start deploying my app, just by filling out this page. So we've made it super easy. And the pipeline that it creates ends up here. So it'll go ahead and add this file here. It is a little bit different than what I have shown you on the screen here. I've modified it. But at the end of the day, it's a YAML file that describes the shape of your pipeline. And the one that we create for you has a single stage that will deploy your app to your production environment. It'll also build it as well. So Static Web Apps knows how to build most apps. So you don't have to worry about configuring, have to understand how to build, like specifically how to build your app. We'll try to figure that out for you. And what we find is that for most people, that works pretty well. And that, if you just want to, like every time you commit code, for that code to be built and deployed to your production environment, the pipeline that we create for you works perfectly. But what a lot of folks have been looking for have been a way to kind of build your app once in a pipeline and then deploy that first to maybe a development environment or a CI environment to make sure that it works with everything else. And then maybe we want to deploy to a QA environment for our QA team to actually have a look at and have a full test, a test through. And then take those same assets and deploy that to a staging environment to have one last check. And then deploy that to production. So before that, we don't make it like it wasn't super easy to do before because we didn't have the capability to deploy to different environments, but now we do. So I want to kind of quickly walk you through a pipeline that does this. So like I was saying before, this is a modified version of the pipeline that is created. I just kind of added a bunch of steps to build and deploy my app in different stages.
So let me get this right. You are looking at the code and you automatically this YAML file is generated, and then you were able to, change it a little bit.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I changed it a little bit. So out of the box, like Static Web Apps just knows how to build your app. But if you want to just build your app once and then deploy it to multiple stages, you can actually configure the build steps yourself for your application. So that's what I've kind of done here. So my app has 3 stages. The first one is build. Hopefully it's big enough. I'll kind of try to make it a little bit bigger. So in here, I'm kind of doing the, like some pretty kind of common things, which is like, like this app happens to be a .NET app. It could be a Node app as well. I was just testing .NET recently, so this is a .NET app. So here I'm building my front end. So for a Node app, it'd be like an npm install and an npm run build. But here I'm running .NET. Same thing with my API. I am so for a Node app, you would do npm install and npm run build, but here I'm doing a .NET publish. And then lastly, I have some tests that I'll kind of show you in a little bit that will actually go and hit a website with a browser to kind of like click around to make sure everything's working properly. And that's like super useful. And it's using a framework called Playwright, which I think we might have talked about last week on this program. And yeah, it's super great because you kind of think about, if you did not have that capability, every time you want to deploy anything, you will, you probably will open up a browser, you would click around randomly, and you just hope that you've tested the right things.
Yes.
But if you're able to kind of codify that using Playwright, you can have, 10 tests, 100 tests, maybe 1,000 tests that run, in your CI/CD pipeline after you've deployed to a certain environment to really verify that your app is working. And typically what people do is that they might even run, maybe like 1 or 2 of those tests or a subset of those tests on their production environment after they deploy it, just to kind of like run it as a smoke test to make sure that, like what I deployed seems to still work. So yeah, because if you didn't have that, you would literally have to open up a browser and kind of just do it yourself.
For anyone who wants to learn more about Playwright, Dev2 has a tag for Playwright. It's it sounds really cool. I actually haven't tried it, but
yeah, it's great, and it's really, really easy to use. It's kind of learned from many years of setting up like these tests. So a lot of things like waiting for a page to appear before you click on the button, all that stuff is taken care of for you, in Playwright.
It's like duplicating yourself to test
stuff.
And multiple browsers too. So who has time for that?
Yeah. So I'll kind of quickly go through the rest of this pipeline. So at the end of it, I'm publishing out some artifacts. What that means is that I'm basically just saving, the built output of each one of these steps, so that I can now take those assets and just deploy them to different environments. Without that, I would have to kind of rebuild it every time, on every stage, and I don't want to do that. So next thing I'm doing is I'm going to do, I have a stage called deploy to staging. Obviously, I'm going to go ahead in here and deploy to staging. So the first thing I do is I download the artifacts that I created in my first stage, and then I use this static web apps task to deploy it. So I'll just kind of quickly point out a couple things. We're saying don't build the app again because it's already built.
Yay.
And I'm going to deploy to an environment in static web apps called staging, and it will just kind of go there. And then right after that, what I do is that I run these commands to run my Playwright tests. And I'll kind of quickly show you the Playwright test in a second. But this is the step that actually runs a Playwright test to make sure that my site that I just deployed to staging is still working the way that I thought it would. And then lastly, I publish the results so that I can see in my pipeline the results of the tests. And then lastly, I have a deploy to production stage that uses the exact same steps and tasks, but this time it deploys it to the production environment. And then I'll kind of quickly show you my my app. So it's I have a front end app here. It happens to be a .NET Blazor app, but it could be a Node app. I have an API app that's an Azure Functions app. And then here I have some Playwright tests. So these are built in C#, but Playwright supports Node as well as Python also. So I'll just kind of quickly show you what one of these things look like. So this is the most basic test that you can run. I'm literally saying, hey, start Chrome. I'm going to browse to my home page, and then I'm just going to check that my title equals index, because that's That's what my app is called. It's literally a sample app. So that's actually a little bit sad there. But you can do something a little bit more fancy where I'm actually like, clicking on things and making sure that my table is rendering. And this table actually renders data that I got from my function app. So it actually verifies that the function app's working too.
You know what? We rarely see tests for a demo app, so I'm already impressed.
Yeah, that might be the most robust part of this whole project. The rest of it is just like literally a hello world app. But I'll really quickly show the pipeline because I know that we're kind of quickly running out of time here. So this is like what it looks like when the pipeline is running. I already started one before the show, and it kind of got to this point where it's already kind of deployed to staging. It's passed the test. So if I actually click on it, I can actually see that the tests have passed. It's 100%. And if I wanted to, I can also see the details of the tests as well. So you can see that the tests that I created here before show up here, and you can see the results. Another thing that I've done is that before deploying to production, I can set up an approval process. So I can say that you can kind of imagine that I kind of navigate over to my app. We're not going to have time to do that today, but like if I navigate over to my app, my staging environment is locked down using a password. So I have to log in first, and then I'll check to make sure that everything's working properly. And then I say, looks good.
Yeah.
Then what it's going to do is then it's going to go ahead now and deploy to production. So this is like, a pretty typical deployment pipeline that you might see in really any kind of app. And we've now kind of brought this capability to static web apps.
This is amazing. Well, I don't want to say back in my day, but I work in companies where I had to deploy at 3 a.m. in the morning because we were working with the Asian team in Asia. And so many things were so manual. And this is amazing. Thank you so much for building this team, and thank the whole team for us. And everybody, you can learn more and meet the rest of the team. Anthony, can you tell us about the anniversary? What is happening?
Yeah, so we actually have a special event happening for the Static Web Apps anniversary. You can go check it out using that link that's on the screen right now. But we have like a full agenda of stuff that's happening. We're going to talk about some new features, and it's going to happen at 10 a.m. Pacific time in North America on May 19th. So for some of you, this might be on May 20th. We're also going to repeat it 12 hours after as well, so that depending on time zone, you can join the one that makes the most sense for you.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for doing that too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's wrap up all of the things that we talked about today. So you said, first of all, there's CI/CD implemented with GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps and other providers and tools, which is amazing. We can add passwords to it, either for the whole thing or just part of it to show it. We have the deployment environments that we can define and automate the deployment when we have some changes. What else I missed?
I think you pretty much caught everything, unless you want me to recap like all 12 of these things that we just talked about, which we won't. Don't worry.
Yeah, we have 1 minute. So everyone, thank you for joining us. And the full demo video, Anthony made it, and you can find it on the aka.ms DevOps SWA. And please join us on the anniversary.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Anthony. It was a pleasure. So nice to have you, as always. And thank you for building this stuff. Bye.